Urgent P. Diddy tried to take poison in prison. Yesterday, Thursday, January 30th, P. Diddy tried to take poison inside the prison. The prison director revealed that Diddy is bribing the guards to get something lethal for him, and the authorities are panicked. The big concern now is that it may not survive until the judgment. Diddy is increasingly unstable, isolated in solitary, talking alone and completely out of reality. What is happening inside that cell? Does he really want to die before the truth comes out? And today, you will hear the detailed account of the prison director about the darkest moments of P. Diddy behind the bars. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because this case is taking a scary course and we will bring everything firsthand. Now let's go to the shocking details of this turnaround that is leaving the authorities desperate. I've seen many men enter these doors, big names, bosses of crime, corrupt politicians. But when P. Diddy crossed that gate for the first time, I noticed something different in it. He was not just a man falling from grace, he was a broken man inside. In the first moments he tried to maintain his posture. He didn't say a word. He just followed the protocols as we removed his luxury clothes and exchanged them for the prison orange uniform. But I realized, the way he looked around, his glazed eyes as if his mind was still trying to understand where he really was. The noise of the closed bars made his body shudder. It was there that I knew. He was not prepared for it. In the first 48 hours, he hardly spoke. He just sat in the corner of the cell, staring at the floor. He refused the food a few times, drank little water. The other detainees whispered his name through the corridors, laughing, making jokes about how he would not last inside. I watched him through the cameras, waiting for him to react in some way. But all he did was sit down, take a deep breath, and swallow the cry. On the third night, I heard the first sobs, weak, muffled, but real. He tried to hide, turned to the wall so that the guards would not see, but the sound echoed. He was crying. That's when I realized that prison was not just a punishment for Diddy, it was a psychological sentence. He was beginning to understand that his life would never be the same. Now I wonder, how long will he hold before falling completely? I've seen a lot of prisoners cry at the first nights, but with Diddy was different. He not only cried, he sank. Each passing day was like he lost another piece of himself. In the first week, I realized that he didn't interact with anyone. She didn't try to talk, she didn't mix with other detainees, nor even to look at the guards when she received her food tray. I ate little, slept even less. Sometimes I kept sitting in the bed, staring at the walls, as if it was stuck inside your mind. But then something happened. One night, one of the guards came to me, nervous. He said Diddy called him discreetly to the cell and whispered something disturbing. "How much do you want to get me something that will end it?" he said. The guard asked what he was talking about, and Diddy went straight to the point. Poison. Something strong, something that guaranteed that he never had to wake up there. The guard, of course, did not follow, but the information spread quickly by the team. This was no longer just depression, it was a real risk. If a man like him, used to having everything in his reach, saw no way out but death, then we knew we would need to act. From that moment, I ordered total surveillance about him. No one would approach without supervision, no contact without monitoring. Diddy was now under direct observation, but that was just the beginning. After the episode with the poison, I knew that Diddy was not just another prisoner dealing with the harsh reality of prison. He was sinking too fast. It wasn't just despair, it was someone who had already given up on everything. I instructed my team to constantly monitor it. We could not risk that he tried something against his own life. But even without access to anything dangerous, he was still destroyed inside. In the following days, I saw a man who seemed increasingly distant from reality. He walked slowly around the cell, as if he was stuck inside his mind. He spent hours lying on the bed, without moving, just looking at the ceiling, his eyes fixed at some invisible point. From time to time he murmured something, small phrases. One night, one of the cameras captured him talking alone, almost like a whisper. Why did I do that? If I could go back. They abandoned me. I knew what was happening. I've seen other prisoners go through this. This was the moment when the form really fell. No parties, no money, no influential friends to protect you. He finally saw the naked truth. His past should be hammering his head without stopping. The decisions it made, the parties, the secrets, the betrayals. Diddy was a man who built an empire, but now, sitting in a cold cell, all that remained were memories of the choices that led him there. On the fourth night after the poison request, the sobs came again. This time, he didn't even try to hide. He was sitting on the bed, hugging his own legs, his head buried in his knees. He cried like a man who knew he would never be who he was again. And I wonder if he knew that everything would end like this. Would it have done something different? I hear that the real hell began for Diddy. It wasn't just prison. It wasn't just the orange uniform, nor the smell of rusty mold and metal. It was abandonment. In the early days, he was still asked for lawyers, expected for some important visit, perhaps an old friend, influential contact, someone who extended his hand. But as the weeks passed, it was clear that no one would come. Diddy started spending hours sitting next to the wing phone. When I was finally able to call someone, I almost always stared at the device in silence before it turned off. Some calls were answered, and I saw on his face what happened. On the other side, they turned off in his face. Then came the day he received the list of correspondences. I was there. He took the paper hopefully, his eyes scouring the sheet. But there was nothing. No letter. No message. The other detainees realized. They don't miss a chance to humiliate someone like him. Passed through the cell and mocked. Where are your friends now, Diddy? Do you think someone still cares about you? You always thought you were a king, but now it's just another forgotten prisoner. It was at this moment that he started to really lose his head. He spoke alone more often. He ran his hand over his face, as if he tried to wake up from a nightmare he couldn't leave. He began to walk in circles in the cell, gnawing his nails until he was bleeding. And then, at dawn, he did something that froze my spine. The cameras showed Diddy sitting on the floor, his eyes wide without flashing. He took a piece of the mattress and began to tear it with his nails, as if looking for something inside. Then he took a loose thread and began to wrap him in his own fingers until they were purple. That's when I realized he was trying to get hurt, even without tools. He was a man who no longer wanted to be there, maybe not even alive. That morning I made a decision. If he continued, he would not last until the judgment. I would have to act before he did something irreversible. I knew Diddy was crumbling, but nothing prepared me for what happened that night. Around 3 in the morning, one of the guards came running to me, pale. He was visibly disturbed and held a notebook in his hand. When I asked what had happened, he just handed me the sheet without saying a word. And there it was, written with shared and almost illegible lyrics. Help me. I pay whatever it is. I just need it to end soon. The guard told me that Diddy called him discreetly to the cell. He whispered so low that he seemed to be afraid of being heard. It offered money, a lot of money, for someone to bring him poison, something strong, something fast, something that guaranteed that he would never wake up inside. The guard was shocked. He tried to keep his calm, but Diddy insisted, his eyes wide, desperate. I swear no one will know. It just gives me what I need. When the guard walked away, Diddy threw herself into the mattress, her hands pulling her hair, heavy breathing as if she were on the edge of a panic attack. He muttered meaningless words, loose phrases. There is no way. They know everything. It's over for me. And then it started to laugh. But it was not a normal laugh. It was a thrilling laugh, dry, scary. A sound that made the other prisoners stop to look. A sound that made the guards look at each other, asking if he was going crazy for good. That night I made my decision. If Diddy was willing to buy his own death, then he could no longer stay there. He needed to be isolated. He needed to be placed in the lonely, not for punishment, but to prevent him from leaving prison inside a black bag. The next morning, even before the coffee was served, we had everything prepared. Diddy would be transferred. No contact with other prisoners. No opportunities for him to try another madness. When the guards entered the cell to take him, he did not react, neither a word nor a sudden movement. It was as if he already knew what would happen. He walked through the handcuffed corridors, his head down, his gaze fixed to the floor. The detainees peered in the bars, letting out insults, shouts, mockery. The king fell. "Where's your money now, Diddy?" "Dies soon, no one cares about you." He didn't answer. He didn't raise his head. He just followed, dragging his feet like a man who no longer had the strength to fight. When the lonely door closed behind him, something changed. Diddy looked around and realized what that meant. No television, no minimally comfortable bed, no human contact, no voice to answer your screams. Only him and the absolute silence. It was there that he broke for good. On the first night, the guards reported sounds from the cell, beats on the wall, panting breathing, murmurs. Diddy talked alone, murmured names, maybe trying to talk to people who weren't there. He got up, sat down, got up, walked around like a caged animal. Then came the scream. A single scream, high, desperate, scary. It was a sound that seemed to come from a man who had been torn from his own reality. A sound that even froze the most experienced guards. No one knows what he saw in that cell. But one thing was certain. The isolation was doing what no judge, no accusation, and no sentences would ever succeed. He was destroying P. Diddy inside. And the worst was yet to come. The days passed, but for Diddy, time no longer existed. The lonely is not just a cell, it is a black hole of the human mind. Absolute silence begins to become deafening. The brain, without stimuli, begins to create its own reality. Hallucinations, whispers that do not exist, shadows moving where there is no light. And Diddy fell completely in this abyss. The guards who watched him began to report strange behaviors. He spent hours sitting on the floor, staring at his hands as if he didn't recognize them anymore. Other times, he hit his head against the concrete wall repeatedly, murmuring something incomprehensible. One dawn, a camera captured something creepy. Diddy was sitting in the darkness, crying and laughing at the same time. He shook his body back and forth, repeating loose words. They know. I should have stopped. There is no way out." Suddenly he began to scrape his nails in his arms, slowly, as if trying to feel something, anything, to make sure it was still alive. When the guards intervened, he looked at them, as if he didn't recognize them, as if they were already living on another plane, far from reality. The next morning he refused to eat, sitting on the floor, completely still, the empty look, a man without any desire to exist. I knew he was approaching the end point, the point where, or he would be completely lost within his own mind, or he would find a way to end everything. And now, with the judgment approaching, the only question left is, are he still enough to hear his own sentence? The day of the judgment is approaching, but for Diddy, that means nothing more. The guards say he no longer reacts to anything. Don't ask about your defense. Does not mention lawyers. It shows no sign of hope. He is just there, breathing but without really existing. Solitary cameras record the same scenes every day. He doesn't speak. Don't move. Just look at the floor. Sometimes it lifts your head and stares at the walls for whole minutes, as if you are seeing something no one else can see. His eyes are back, his pale face, his beard growing up. He no longer looks like a man, looks like a ghost inside his own body. Rumors between prisoners say he is already dead inside. May everything he has done in the past now haunts him day and night. That he no longer wants to get out of prison because he knows that what he waits for him outside can be even worse. But then one thing changed. Last night a guard heard something strange from the cell. For the first time in days, Diddy spoke. But he wasn't talking to herself. The guard approached the grid and heard whispers, a conversation. But with whom? Diddy spoke slowly, in an almost hypnotic tone. "Don't leave me here. I didn't know I would get to this point. Please, please." But there was no one there. The cell was empty. The guards don't know if they were just delusions of the mind of a broken man, or if Diddy really believes he's talking to something or someone. The only certainty we have is that when the trial comes, it will no longer be the tycoon of the song that will be sitting before the judge. It will be just the empty shell of a man who has given up on everything.